Hi, got a really interesting video for you today. So in my last video I was talking about ROI apps and comparing them to Ponzi schemes and trying to put the information out there that you can potentially put money in these and expect some return, but there are risks, and just to make everyone aware of the risks as I see them. So obviously not financial advice in any way. This is just my view of what these apps do and how they work. Someone suggested in the comments that we try and work out basically how long these platforms can last. And so, thinking about it, the information is publicly available on the blockchain. You can extract, you can run some reports and put together some tables and some models to try and figure out, I guess, what is the risk in terms of how long these are going to last. So I initially started to have a look at um, MATICSTAKER actually, but I found a limitation in the Polygon blockchain tools. Unfortunately, you can only extract a maximum of 5,000 records per day, 5,000 transactions, and for some of those busy days, it looks like they got up to about 10,000. So it would be very difficult manually going through a page like 25 transaction a page and trying to extract 10,000 um, transactions, so that was just not going to work. So I had a look at Stable One, their newer V2 contract. It's fairly new. It's only I think a couple of weeks old or even less. And basically, just to show you what I've done, you can do this same thing yourself if you wanted to for one of these other ROI apps. But for Stable One, all you need to do is go through to the contract piece, the contract part. And there should be a link there to a contract address, which will open up in Polygon Scan. And from here, you can look at the source code, or what I did is you go to the transactions, and this is every transaction under that contract that's ever been made. You can go to download CSV down in the corner, and you can pull that out into an Excel spreadsheet to try and work out basically all the money going in and out, and how long it's got to last. So that's what I've done, and the results are pretty interesting. So I'll take you through my process here and what my conclusions are, and look, I'll link the spreadsheet as well, link to the Google spreadsheet in the comments if you want to have a look. I'm open to the possibility there could be a mistake here, or there could be a calculation error. And as I'll show you, the all the information isn't necessarily there in the blockchain, but based on what I've looked at, it seems pretty consistent with reality. And so I think even if there are a couple of minor issues, the overall picture should be pretty much valid. And we'll see if the predictions that we make here are actually borne out. So just to show in a little bit more detail what I've done, so I've taken out these figures, loaded them into Excel, and so basically just did a dump of all of the information, as you can see, from the beginning of the contract in on the 21st of February down to the latest. I just cut it off at yesterday, my time here, which is the third end of midnight, end of day on the 3rd of March, as essentially just the basis for the modeling. You can see there's 25,000 lines, 25,000 transactions. And so then just try to work out, well, how do I come up with a model? And there's a few limitations here. We only actually have transactions in listed. So if you're trying to get the value of MATIC that has been withdrawn or reinvested, you can only really come up with an approximation. You can see all of these withdrawals and reinvests down the whole list are all zeros. And so we've only got essentially invests and reinvests going in to the contract. But based on the rates that they're paying and the dates of these, we can break down a pretty good approximation, I think, of what this looks like. So taken a copy of the data, gotten rid of all of the extra bits we don't need. So we've got the date of each transaction, basically the address and the value in. So I've got a filter here that's incorrect, but this was essentially invest. That's the only one with any usable data, and so that shows the total amount of MATIC invested per address on each day. And I've thrown that into a pivot table, and just basically the only data that you can really get out of this, and the basis for the model, is for each day how much MATIC was invested. Okay, and so from there, you take the you go back to stable one and try to look at their white paper, understand how the contract works and how it's paid. Actually, this is actually out of date, and this reinvestment has been changed in V2. But I think the rates and the some of the fees are pretty consistent. So really, where you end up is looking at this. So 7% daily is the daily return that they're paying out for 30 days with a 21% reinvestment every day. And it's confusing, but this 21% actually comes out of this 7%. And then there are fees, transaction fees on top of that. And then you can kind of work out day to day where that how that looks. So this is the spreadsheet that I'm looking at in Google Docs. As I said, I'll post a link to it, and feel free to let me know if there's anything that doesn't make sense there. But this first section is in green is the actual amounts up to the 3rd of March. So here are the assumptions. So withdrawal rate of 5.53%, and what that means is that's 7% times 0.79, which is minus that 21% reinvestment. So 21% of your withdrawal gets reinvested, and 79% gets withdrawn basically. There's a 10% fee on top of that withdrawal, but that doesn't really matter in terms of the calculations. That just means the end recipient gets that 90%, and the people who run stable one get that remaining 10%. But it all comes out of the contract anyway, so I'm not counting that in the calculations. The reinvest rate, I do have to calculate a fee in there. So there's the 7% withdraw times the 21% that gets reinvested minus the fee there. So I can already just see I've just made a typo there. That should be 94% because it's a 6% fee on withdrawal. But that's a very small impact there anyway. So 1.3% of your daily of the amount that's in there, assuming that you're withdrawing every day when you reinvest. When you withdraw, that 1.38% gets reinvested. I'll talk about this referral adjustment rate in a moment, but basically let's have a look at the model or the history on a daily basis and how what this data tells us. So on day one, the 21st of February, there was 226,494 invested into stable one. So that's the total into the contract. So the next column shows the cumulative investment invested. So we know starting at 0 on day one, you can see I've got the day of operation next to that that list. On day one, the total is the same as the total invested on that day. So obviously on day one, there's no payouts and there's no reinvestments. So the total of the new investments is exactly the same amount as was invested there. So day one is simple. The contract balance is exactly what was put into the contract, and there's no withdrawals and there's no reinvestments. So at this point, I should just point out that on this spreadsheet, I've differentiated between the daily reinvested and new investments. Because what you have here under the daily invested, there's no way of breaking apart what was actually invested into the contract from new people and what was essentially reinvested from people's withdrawals. So just that, again, going back to the data, the initial data, the transparency is not there to work out exactly how much. So all I've done is calculated how much should be reinvested, and then assumed that the rest of that daily total was new investments. So day two, the total invested was 194k MATIC. This is all in MATIC and not in dollars. So 194k MATIC. and basically then you have to calculate the daily withdrawals. So the daily withdrawals are 5.53% of yesterday's cumulative total because you're paying people for their deposits yesterday, essentially. And then the daily reinvested is that 1.38% of the daily total. That goes back into the cumulative total and increases the cumulative invested and the contract balance. So really, what's the difference between the cumulative invested and the contract balance? Well, the cumulative invested is the total amount that you've got in the contract, or the total amount that people have invested that you need to be paying a rate on. So you need to be giving people money back. And the total contract balance is the amount that you actually have available in the contract to pay people back their interest rates. So you can see from the outset, obviously, because of the nature of these ROI apps, the cumulative investment invested is always higher than the total contract balance. And that means really you can never pay people the total amount of withdrawals that they're due. So that's just the nature of this. Again, if you're unsure about what that means, have a look at my last video talking about ROI apps and how they're similar to Ponzi schemes. And so, yeah, essentially the end game here is always going to be that they can't pay out the full total amount. So this section in green, as I've said, is all calculations or trying to work out exactly how the smart contract has managed people's funds from day 1 to day 11, which is yesterday, and how close is this model to real life. One thing I realized when I did the calculations was that I didn't have a visibility into how much the referral rate was paying out for people, because some people have referrals, probably not many people have referrals, most people don't, but they pay out extra based on how many referrals that you've gotten, and I can't really work that out exactly. So just to when I did the initial calculations, the amount was off on the total contract balance by an amount. So I've got basically a 0.8% referral adjustment rate in there on the assumption that that 0.8% accounts difference is accounted for by referrals. So that's what that is. And again, this is just a consequence of the data not being 100% there and having to make a lot of assumptions around this. But let's just compare the model here to reality. So 3rd of March. Now this was as of just over 12 hours ago my time. So the values aren't going to be exactly the same as when we look at stable one, but they should be pretty close. So total contract balance 858. Okay, let's have a look back at stable one. Total contract balance 855. So very close. This model is pretty close to reality. And let's have a look at what else have we got. So the total invested. So total amount, cumulative investment total, invested total is 1.54 million MATIC. Back to here, we've got 1.54 million MATIC. So it's very close. It seems to me that this analysis, although there might be some bugs, there might be a few false assumptions, it's landing us in the with the right total. So I'm pretty confident about that. Now this part of it is not matching, but I'll explain why. So we'll look at the cumulative daily withdrawal. So this is the total amount withdrawn over this period of time, this 11 days, is 561, and the daily reinvested is 122. Now, what I don't know is how many people, instead of withdrawing, have actually just completely just reinvested their withdrawals back into the system. So there's no way of knowing that, because when you go to do your withdrawals, you can, or like my time is on because I've recently taken some out of this, but it will say withdraw or reinvest. So some people might withdraw, some people might reinvest, and there's no way from the contract of knowing what they've actually selected, or no way that I can see easily of knowing what they've actually done. So if we look at the totals here for what's been, where is it? So withdrawals and total reinvestment. It looks like more people are reinvesting than purely withdrawing. So if you look at the model again here. So you'd expect the total of all withdrawals to be about 560,000. Total of all reinvestments is 122,000. But when you look at the actual here reported in the contract, it's about closer to 50-50, 332 versus 364,000. So a lot of people, it seems, are clicking that reinvest button and putting money back into the system. But you look at the sum of these two, 332 and 364, takes us to just under 700k, and that's not too far off where we are between these two. If I look at the sum of these two daily withdrawals and reinvested, 683k. Minus obviously we've got some time difference here, and we've got some fees that are unaccounted for in the withdrawals. So we're very close. So I think based on this analysis, you can say that between for the time period that I'm looking at, these calculations seem to be holding up. We've arrived at the correct or a close contract balance. We've arrived at pretty close total investment and total withdrawal. So the question then becomes, well, how long is this going to last, and can we project this out into the future and try to work out at what point stable one is going to fall over? So what point is it necessarily going to run out of money? So again, if you don't understand why that would happen, go back and watch the video on ROI apps, the last video on this channel, and you can see why. But essentially, you follow this and you'll note that the cumulative invested always goes up. The total contract balance will go up for a while, but the withdrawals are constantly increasing because you need to go back and you need to pay your promised rate back to all of these withdrawals. So at some point, the money's going to run out and people are going to start not being paid. So the amount of time that stable one is going to be operational is dependent on basically how many new investments come into the platform. So these rows below in the orange, these are all forecast costs, balances based on some assumptions. So let's make the first assumption of a daily investment of 128,361, and what that daily investment is basically the average of what has been invested per day under new investments here. If you take these columns and you take the average, how much new investment has gone into the platform every day, you get this 128,000. So if you make the assumption that people are going to continue to invest at the same rate into this platform, basically you look at where the model takes you, and the important part is this total contract balance, because you can see when that contract balance runs out, that is when the whole thing falls apart. There's just no money in there to pay everyone. So if we follow at the current average investment rate, that takes us to the 20th of March, so 17 days in the contract. I also want to point out that per the stable one contract, the way it works, it's 7% daily for 30 days. Okay, so I haven't even put into the table what happens beyond 30 days because the model doesn't even really last that long. It takes us to 20 days. 20th of March, 17 days here. So that's kind of beyond the contract. So look, I've just realized that is not 100% correct. Let's take this one. So yeah, so that is 20th of March is actually the 28th day of the contract. So we're still we have people who are on day one are still getting those interest payments. So there's no issue there. So again, to reiterate, the same average daily rate of 128,000 MATIC going into stable one. If that continues, we are going to run out of money on the 20th of March, 28 days into the contract. So that's scenario one. You can plug in whatever number you want into here. Scenario two might be, well, I actually think that, hypothetically, you might think that people are going to start depositing more into stable one as they see returns. So you can see by putting that in there that the new investments will populate in this column every day you're getting 200,000 in. With that kind of in cash, it projects out to the 24th of March. So as you can see, like it doesn't matter too much how much new investment is coming in. At some point, the other thing to notice is how this appears on a graph, and I haven't got a graph here, but look at these totals. They're hovering around 1.1, 1.2, 1. Then back down to a million, and then from here it's a drastic fall. 9, 8, 7, 5, 3, 2, 1 gone over the course of a week. So it would be a fast crash, essentially to zero. And the reason for that is you can imagine on this side of the equation, the total amount that they're paying in interest, essentially from people's principals a day, and the withdrawals just becomes massive. And the more money that goes in, obviously the short term, there's money in the contract, but that number just keeps driving up until in a short period of time, this just crashes and people are not going to get paid. So that's an optimistic view, I think, of a 200,000 daily investment. We've only seen one day like that over that, and that was the very first day of the contract. So that would be extremely optimistic if it lasted that long. Take a more pessimistic view, and maybe it drops down to an average of 50,000 daily, and that will bring the end date forward, the running out of money date forward to the 15th of March, so about 10 days from now, and day 23 of the contract. And I guess for completeness, what happens if from today no one was to put any money into Stable 1? Well, it would run out of money on the 12th of March. So essentially 8 days left in the contract before it runs out of money. So again, I'll leave this spreadsheet, a link to this spreadsheet on in the comments. I'll make it read only, so obviously people don't go in and corrupt it, but you can save a copy of it and play around with this as much as you want. But I think regardless of how much money is coming in daily, I think it's pretty clear that worst case scenario, what did I say, around the 14th of March, that's if no more money were to come in, and best case scenario around the 24th of March. So that's the kind of range I think we're looking at. And just to reiterate, this is my own analysis. I'm not an expert here. I'm just taking what's on the smart contract and what they've put in their white paper and tried to crunch the numbers and try to work out when the money runs out. So I think we'll see in the coming weeks, I think in the next 2 weeks, really how that's going to pan out. And I'll be just checking this as well, because what this gives me is the ability to take a look and see, well, how much on a daily basis, how much has been added in investments, and basically whether this total contract balance is matching up with the projection. And if it does match up, if we can see it probably going down, I think imagine if at 100,000 daily, would expect it to go, still not even going up. If it's getting 100,000 daily, it's still not going up. So I think we just expect to see, we're seeing similar numbers to what we have been before, which is around about the 100 mark, maybe just under 100 mark in the last week. Then we're going to continue to see this contract balance drop down, and somewhere around this point, around the 18th or so of March, it'll run out of money and people won't be able to withdraw. So hopefully this helps and puts some context into some of the investment and money you might have in Stable 1. And so I'm not here to cause any panic. Again, this is my analysis. It's not by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not an expert in Stable 1 or in finance in general. This is just the way it seems to me based on the figures they've provided. So hopefully this helps. And if there's any, if anyone picks up any errors in this spreadsheet or notices any major mistakes in the analysis, please let me know in the comments, and I'm happy to do a follow-up video if there's any major corrections to be had. But it will be interesting to see over the next couple of weeks how reality pans out, and if we do hit somewhere around that basically 14th to the 21st, say that week range, to basically run out of money in the stable one contract. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hopefully it's been helpful. See you next time.